Welcome to the podcast summary of 1997 Michigan Wolverines football team. This one's about a team that went from years of frustration to 12-0 against the toughest schedule in the country, then finished with a national title that was glorious and still somehow arguable. Michigan's 1997 season had a little bit of everything: a rebuilt roster, a suffocating defense, Charles Woodson doing basically every football job available, and a championship that ended up split between the AP and coaches' polls. What makes that season hit so hard is the starting point. Michigan came in after 4 straight 4-loss seasons, with a national title drought pushing close to 50 years, and a schedule rated the toughest among 112 Division I-A teams. Lloyd Carr compared the climb to Mount Everest, and honestly, that didn't feel dramatic at the time. It felt accurate. This wasn't a loaded machine rolling into an easy runway. The team opened with real uncertainty, especially on offense. Brian Griese had to win a 3-way quarterback competition over Scott Dreisbach and a backup named Tom Brady, who, yes, would eventually do just fine for himself. Up front, Michigan had already lost 3 experienced offensive linemen to the draft. Then left tackle Jeff Backus missed time with a ruptured appendix. They were patching things together enough that Steve Hutchinson and Chris Zeman moved from the defensive line to offense just to cover the holes. So the basic shape of the season was this: a proud program with a lot to prove, a roster with some awkward edges, and almost no margin for error. The reason Michigan became so hard to shake was the defense. It allowed just 222.8 yards and 9.5 points per game, both the best marks in the Big Ten since 1985. And it wasn't one of those defenses that lived off a soft patch of schedule and a good reputation. It controlled games all the way through. In the first 8 games, Michigan didn't allow a single fourth-quarter point or a second-half touchdown. That is an absurd level of week-to-week control. The Penn State game is probably the cleanest example. Penn State came in unbeaten with the nation's 8th-ranked offense, and Michigan held it to 169 total yards, 0 third-down conversions in 12 tries, and the biggest halftime deficit of the Joe Paterno era. Michigan won 34-8, and it became Penn State's worst home loss under Paterno. By the end of the season, that unit had led the Big Ten in rushing defense, passing defense, total defense, scoring defense, and pass efficiency defense. It also set an NCAA Division I-A record by allowing just 8.8 yards per pass completion, which is one of those stats that tells you nothing came easy. Even completed passes felt like work. And then there's Charles Woodson, who turned an already great defense into something historic, and also made the Heisman conversation much bigger than one season. He became the first primarily defensive player to win the Heisman Trophy, beating Peyton Manning by a 1,815 to 1,553 margin, with 433 first-place votes to Manning's 281. That mattered because the award had long carried a quiet assumption that the most important player had to be an offensive star, usually a quarterback. Woodson basically walked in and rejected that idea on live television. He picked off 8 passes, returned a punt 78 yards for a touchdown against Ohio State, caught touchdown passes, ran for scores, and even completed a 28-yard pass to Griese on that famous double pass against Wisconsin. Against Baylor, he played 46 defensive downs, 6 on special teams, and 5 on offense. That's not gadget usage. That's being central to the team in every phase. The award hall matched the season. Heisman, Walter Camp, Bednarik, Nagurski, Thorpe, Big Ten MVP, and a stack of All-American honors. One of the interesting things about this Michigan team is that the offense wasn't built around huge individual numbers. There was no 1,000-yard rusher and no 500-yard receiver. Chris Howard led the ground game with 938 yards, and Ty Streets led the receivers with 476. That tells you a lot about how they won. It was balance, field position, defense, and timely plays. Not one player torching people for monster production every week. Griese became the stabilizer in the middle of all that. He was a 5th-year senior, not the obvious incumbent coming into the season, and he ended up setting Michigan's single-season records with 193 completions and 307 attempts. Then, in the Rose Bowl, he threw for 251 yards and 3 touchdowns and took home MVP honors. It's also pretty wild to look back and see how much pro talent was tucked into a team that didn't always look flashy on paper. 31 players eventually reached the NFL, including Woodson, Grease, Glenn Steele, Chris Howard, and Steve Hutchinson, who'd become Hall of Fame caliber. And again, Tom Brady was there too, just not starting any games. That roster has a pretty funny hindsight glow to it. Michigan finished the job in the Rose Bowl with a 21-16 win over Washington State, which was a great test because it matched the nation's best defense against the number 2 offense. Washington State was averaging 42.5 points and 502.1 yards a game behind Ryan Leaf, so this was not some ceremonial final step. Michigan held on even after Leaf nearly stole the ending with that frantic hook and lateral sequence that got the Cougars down to the Wolverines' 26. And then came the weird part. Nebraska beat Tennessee 42-17 in the Orange Bowl and jumped Michigan in the coaches' poll by 4 points and 2 first-place votes. Michigan kept the AP title, while Nebraska got the coaches' vote, so the season ended with a split national championship. That was especially unusual because, since the AP moved permanently to a post-bowl final poll in 1968, no winning number 1 team had previously won its bowl and then lost its AP lead. Michigan was still recognized as champion by the AP, the National Football Foundation, the Football Writers Association of America, and several other selectors, but it wasn't unanimous. So the 1997 Wolverines got the banner, the parade, the history, and also a permanent argument attached to the whole thing. College football does love leaving a door open for debates that never really die. What lasts most from that season is the shape of it. A proud program rebooted, a defense that squeezed the air out of games, and a star in Woodson who made people rethink what the best player in the country could look like. Even with the split title, it still feels like one of the clearest examples of a team becoming bigger than anyone expected, 1 week at a time. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.